Welcome to the Be Mobile Show. It is Jack and Alicia, and today we're going to answer a question that we get from a lot of our clients, which is how much weight should I lift for a particular exercise, say the squat or the deadlift or the overhead press. So we're going to answer that today so you can get the most out of your strength training.
Yeah, and we've even brought in some weights for some props. So really, really heavy weights we've got lying on the
We
desk
do,
here,
and
which
I
is
like
gonna
the
be
way
great.
you've organised them, Jack.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Now, if you don't know who we are physiotherapists here on Sydney's Northern Beaches, and we specifically work with adults over 55, helping them get fit and strong. But we also work with people all around the world in our online program. So g'day to all our members and 8-week Fit and Strong program participants who are doing our online programs. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're cruising along with your exercise. But if you are wondering how much weight you should be lifting in your program at the moment, well, this is the best episode for you. Although you should know that because we do give lots of that education in the workouts. But anyway.
But before we get to that, Jack, I had a question for you. Do you know why the bodybuilder was evicted?
Because he was legally staying in a house.
He was squatting.
Oh, God. Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, Alicia, speaking of squatting, do you know why the hamburger went to the gym?
No, I don't.
To get bigger buns.
All right, enough jokes. I hope we haven't tired our audience out with our poor humour.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty bad, and so we apologise in advance for the next year. Okay, let's get into it, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start by using the props that we have here. So I want to do an overhead press, Alicia, which is an exercise you'll often see in our workouts, and maybe you've done that at home.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know how much weight I need to start with. So I'm doing, let's just say I'm doing sets of 15 repetitions, okay? How much weight should I be lifting?
Well,
you've never met me, you don't know me.
No, that's right. So it's difficult to tell you an exact weight that you should lift.
Okay.
So instead, we want to look more at the effort that is required to lift a certain weight.
Okay, so before we start pressing away here, we're going to be talking about your rate of perceived exertion.
Yes, so
I'm going to get
rate of perceived exertion is basically your level of effort or how hard you are trying. So we've got a graph up there.
Yep, I got that
and
up.
As you can see, it's got the 10 at the top, the red. Now that is the most intense level that you can exercise. So super difficult, couldn't be any harder. And that scale goes all the way down to 1, which is super easy. So we also have another graph there as well, which is the same thing. It's still a scale of 0 or 1 to 10, but this one has weightlifters on it, and it has extremely hard, which is number 10, and extremely easy, which is number 0.
Okay.
So I want you to post in the comments, what intensity do you think we should be working at for our weight training, our strength training on that scale of 0 to 10? So pop it in the comments what you think the answer is to that.
Yeah, and we'll also say this is based on the whole premise of strength training, which is to gain strength.
Yes.
Yeah, so what do you think for the most effective strength gains, how hard do you need to be working? Because I think it's a very commonly misunderstood concept, which really need to tackle here.
Indeed.
So as we said, the focus should be on getting strong. But when first starting a strength training program, I think it's really important to note that we should be starting relatively low on that RPE scale. So let's back off from the kind of maximal strength gains that we're looking at, things like bone density, strength gain. Let's just talk about when first starting a program. Alicia, where would you recommend, I'm going to get this RPE back up here. Where would you recommend someone start if they've never done
strength training before? I'd be aiming for a 2 or a 3. Really, particularly if you've never done any type of strength training before, or even if you have, but you've had a break, you might have for various reasons. I'd really just be focused on trying to get familiar with the movements again. Even doing body weight exercises for somebody that hasn't been engaging or isn't conditioned to them can be enough.
Yeah, great. So I've got the scale of the weightlifters there. So around that somewhat easy mark.
Is that what you would suggest?
100%. I know I suggest this all the time. Even myself, like when I'm just getting back into a bit of running at the moment after some hip injury stuff, and I'm starting at a really, really easy level for my running. Like in fact, I'm not even getting puffed during my running because it's just getting my hip used to things again. So yeah, when you're first starting things off, like anything in life, you don't want to go 100% into it, because either you'll lose motivation very quickly because things get too hard, or you may come across injury or something like that if you're going too hard too soon.
Yeah, that's often what we often see is people that have ramped things up too quickly. Often pain can occur. So you want to give yourself a chance by starting out nice and easy. There's plenty of time to ramp up as time goes on, but nice and easy to start. Yeah,
so let's see what some people have said. And this is really good. It means the people, our members, have been listening to us. So hello, people. Thank you very much for coming. So Heather says an 8 out of 10. So this is talking about, trying to get the best strength gains, muscle mass, bone density. Sue says a 6. Angie says 6, somewhat hard. Carmel says a 7. Val says, I think, somewhat hard. 8 out of 10 for Sarah. And Catherine says a 7 out of 10. Those are very interesting answers. Alicia, what would you say is the kind of optimal intensity to work at?
So Heather, you got it with 8 out of 10.
Great.
So 8 out of 10 effort, 80%.
Yeah, right. So you're working at a hard enough intensity so that you're able to get those strength gains, but not so much so that you are so exhausted after every single session. So a nice little way to think of this is what we call reps in reserve, Alicia.
Yeah.
So let's just take the scale out of 10. If you're working with 2 reps in reserve, that means by the end of the amount of repetitions that you're doing, so let's just say you're doing 10 repetitions, by the end of that 10 repetitions, you should feel like you have around 2 to 3 repetitions left in the tank.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's kind of like a nice little sweet spot. You're going to challenge yourself enough to be making those strength gains, potential bone density gains, muscle mass gains. However, you're not going to be exhausting yourself so much so that the next day you can't actually do anything.
That's right.
Which is what we don't want, because it's not good for habit forming.
Is it? So 2 good ways to think about it. Either 8 out of 10 effort or having 2 or 3 reps left in the tank, reps in reserve.
Okay,
yes.
Well, let's talk about why we want to train for strength then, because people might say, well, why don't I just work at a 4 out of 10 makes it easier? Well, it's because you're probably not going to get as good a strength gain. So should we talk about strength?
So firstly, what is strength? It's the maximum amount of force that you can produce in a single movement. Yeah.
So the ability, and we'll make it just simple and say the person's ability to produce force.
Yeah.
But muscle strength would be the ability for your muscles to contract and produce force.
That's right. Yeah. So say, for example, the heaviest weight you could pick up off the ground in one single movement.
Yeah, that's a nice, easy way to think of it. Okay, but how do we get stronger? And this is what's really important to talk about when we're talking about how much weight we should be lifting.
That's right. So I think this graph is really interesting because it gives us a visual of how strength training works. So it's called the stress recovery adaptation graph. So the stress is the strength training. So as you can see, we've got the starting ability there, and we're adding a stress with your strength training. And then we'll call that line on the side, that's basically your strength and performance. So initially that will go down after the stress.
Yeah. And we've all seen that when we're tired after a session, obviously.
A bit tired and probably possibly a little bit sore as well.
Yeah.
But then that red line starts to go up because what's happening is the adaptation. And you can see then that it's a new ability level. So the strength and performance level has exceeded the starting ability. Then that same process can be repeated again and again. Yeah,
that's a really nice explanation. And in there, we talked about recovery. And when it comes to recovery, that's things like, getting enough protein, getting enough sleep, and also not overdoing the activity. So if you do a really heavy strength training session, you go, I'm going to do a second one that day, your stress might be too much so that you don't actually have the right amount of recovery to make that adaptation. So if you work at a 10 out of 10 intensity, that kind of depression line that you see there from the stress, that might be really big, which means you need 3 or 4 days rest rather than 1 day rest to adapt. So that's why it's important to hit that kind of 7 to 8 out of 10, because it's not so much that you take days and days and days to recover. You might take 1 or 2 days to recover, and then you're good to go again.
That's right.
Yep, and I'll check that comment here from Sandra. So Sandra says, I do 8 out of 10. I definitely need 2 days in between, sometimes even 3. Recovery rate is important to me, or I'll be tired out walking or biking. Yeah. So Sandra, if you're feeling that you're doing 8 out of 10, but you're needing 2 to 3 days recovery in between, like let's just say you go for a strength training session on the Monday and then you can't work out again till the Thursday, I would say you're probably hitting those sessions too hard. So if you're feeling that much fatigue for that many days, I'd actually bring back the weights. You might actually be working closer to a 10 than you think. We are going to talk about that in a minute, but yeah, I'd be pulling back.
Particularly if it's impacting your ability to do those other activities that you enjoy, you're walking and you're biking.
Yep.
Because those are things that you want to be able to do. You don't want to be too fatigued for those.
Yeah, and this is a really good point to touch on, is volume. So the volume of your training is one of the biggest factors of how strong you will get. So if you're able to do, let's just say you did 2 workouts a week for half an hour each, that is an hour worth of strength training, let's just say. If you're doing the hardest session you can in that half an hour and you can only do 1 strength training session a week, you're only getting half an hour of volume. Whereas if you can pull back a little bit so that you can recover and do, let's just say 3 gym sessions a week, three strength sessions a week, you're adding all that extra volume. So actually doing 90 minutes of strength training, which is going to be much more important for your gains in the future. And the same thing comes with cardio exercise. So don't be overdoing it so much so that you need all of that recovery time.
That's right. Yeah.
I hope that's clear.
Yeah.
I think that was clear.
Yeah, I think that was clear. Yes. All right. So just to recap, 8 out of 10 is the optimal for improvements in strength and also bone density. We know that from the research. If you're working at a 4 out of 5, you're still getting benefits, but you will still be getting strength gains, but not the maximum strength gains you could if you were working a little bit higher up the scale, around that 7 or 8.
And Alicia, just to contextualize it, you were talking about just before we came live on the show about how a lot of people think they're working at a 10 out of 10.
That's right.
Do you want to explain what I mean by that? But they're not actually.
Yeah. So there's how do you know if you're working hard enough? So you can test yourself. So say, for example, you're doing 10 reps of a deadlift with 10 kilos and you're like, this is pretty hard. I think I'm working at an 8 out of 10. I think I've got 2 or 3 reps left in the tank. So go see how many more reps you can do beyond the 10 reps. Now, if you can get another 2 to 3, you're working perfectly at that 8 out of 10. Yep. However, if you can do another 5 or 10 reps, you're
probably not working hard.
You probably have overestimated how hard you're working.
Yep.
And in that instance, you can try lifting a heavier weight. So say, for example, go up to a 12 kilo deadlift and see how that feels for the 10 repetitions. Right. So I think it's kind of a bit of an experiment, a bit of trial and error, and it can be good to test yourself to see how hard you are working by how many more reps you can do.
Great. Yeah, and that's that reps in reserve concept we talked about before. Now, Alicia, I've got a great photo of one of our members. I won't mention the member's name, but I won't mention the dog's name either for privacy issue. But we've got one of our members' dogs here. This is what it looks like.
That's what it looks
when
like.
You're challenging yourself. After the session, you need a little snooze. So there's a very, very cute picture of a beautiful golden retriever on the trampoline.
Very cute.
More likely blocking one of our members from doing their exercise than actually working out. So that's, we fully understand that. Okay, let's talk about if you're not progressing your weight, because what I would love to hear in the comments is we've got quite a few members that have been exercising with us for kind of almost 4 years now. Our first 8-week program was in August 2020. So coming up to 4 years. So happy 4th year birthday. What happens if you've been doing your deadlifts or you've been doing your squats, you've hit 20 kilos, 30 kilos, 40 kilos, let's just say, I'm just popping those numbers out, and you've kind of stagnated there and you're not actually progressing more than that. Is that a bad thing, Alicia? Like what happens? What if we plateau? Does that mean we're not gaining strength?
Well, that's a good question. Should you just give up strength training if you're not improving? Of course not, because you're still getting a lot of value out of doing it. You're going to get the most gains when you first start strength training. That's in the weeks and months after that. That's when you're going to see the biggest amount of improvement.
And can we just explain why that is for a second? Because I think a lot of people say, well, I've made these gains so early and I'm not making any more. And that's because you aren't as strong as you are going to become. So beginners always make progress a lot more quickly. Just like a sprinter, like we've got the Olympics on at the moment, like who's one of the sprinters?
Noah Lyle.
He
won the gold.
Great. So he is not going to take off much time, maybe a millisecond off his 100-meter sprint if he trains and trains and trains for years. But if myself, as someone who is not a very good sprinter, if I got the professional coaching and all the training that he gets, I would probably wipe off 2 seconds off my 46-second 100-meter sprint, right? And that's because I'm a beginner. I can make much bigger gains. But the further and further you go, the harder it is to actually progress. But that doesn't mean you're not maintaining your strength, is it?
No, that's right. And I think you used the word then, Jack, maintaining that maintenance. And because if you weren't strength training, you would be getting weaker.
Yep.
So
we know that from the evidence.
We know that 100%. So it's important to remember that. And I mean, in my own strength training, that like my weights aren't going up. Yep. I am maintaining my strength. So I would focus more on the level of effort. So your RPE that we've been talking about, rather than the actual weight you're lifting. So try to aim for that 8 out of 10, regardless of what weight that equates to.
Great. So I think, that's probably the really big point that we need to stress is to focus on your challenge, your rate of perceived exertion, and make sure you've got those just, 2 to 3 reps left in the tank at the end of the set. So to summarize it, don't worry so much about the weight you're lifting, worry about the challenge that you are putting on your body. Because at the end of the day, the cells in your body, they don't know what 40 kilos is. They just need to adapt to a certain amount of stress that you put on them with the right amount of recovery. And that's all.
Yeah.
That's how we get
That's
stronger.
a good way to think of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And I'll just caveat that quickly because we are physios who deal a lot with people who are injured. When it comes to injury, there are certain stages of injury where you will progress someone to that kind of 8 out of 10 challenge. But let's just say someone has strained their ankle. We probably wouldn't put them straight back into an 8 out of 10 intensity for their exercise. We actually probably would really bring it back, just like we said before when you're starting a program, to something more like a 4 or 5 out of 10, where it's, because we're more focused on the pain, things being very tolerable and easing them back in. So if you do have an injury, I think that's
100%. Yeah, we've been talking about the optimal here, but most certainly if you are in pain or injured, that's definitely a reason to scale back and do what's tolerable. And that you might be right down the lower end of the scale in terms of intensity there.
Great. Now, Sandra says, that's clear. Thanks, Jack. And it is what I'm currently doing. I dropped the weights down a bit and doing 3 a week. Sandra, bloody absolute mind reader. And then Karina says, sometimes I feel like I'm working higher than I probably am due to pain. Yeah, that's fair enough. And that's where we said just scale back if you do need to.
Definitely.
For that. And then Poppy says, I try to do a session every other day and eat something with high protein within 45 minutes, then walk on recovery day. Yeah, I love that. I think getting some lighter exercise in those, what you would call recovery days. And I probably wouldn't, a recovery day from the strength training, but certainly not a recovery day in total, because you can go and do any form of cardio that you want. But I get what you're saying there, Poppy. Great. What we'll do is we'll just touch on the benefits of strength training briefly, because we've been talking about it and we talk about it a lot, don't we?
We talk about it all the time. And, there's just so many, benefits to strength training. It improves your ability to do things in your everyday life, picking up things off the ground, lifting things overhead. It can improve your bone mineral density.
Yep, it can improve obviously your strength.
Your strength.
It can improve things like walking speed. So with increased, I believe it's lower leg and upper leg strength, you can increase the speed with which you walk. My apologies.
Yeah, it can improve your cognition and your mood.
Yep.
And I really feel that myself. If I don't train, I notice I feel a bit fuzzy in the head. I don't feel like the wheels are turning as quickly.
Yeah.
And it just boosts my mood as well.
Yeah. And it's incredibly good for your heart and all the blood vessels that you have around the body. By increasing our blood pressure while we're working out, we make our veins more pliable, so they're less likely to have kind of artery issues in the future, which is just phenomenal, I think. So reducing your risk of cardiovascular disease and other lifestyle diseases like diabetes.
Yeah, even certain types of cancer.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think actually a really big one here, because a lot of our clients want to lose fat.
Yes.
And that's a big goal for a lot of people. We always get this question, how do I get rid of that? And this is not my term. People say, how do I get rid of my tuck shop arms, or the whatever people call them, which is basically the fat underneath the arm. And I would say you're not going to necessarily get rid of that fat in terms of chop the fat off, but you can improve your muscle mass, which is what people refer to as tone. So the more muscle you have, kind of technically the more tone you have. So rather than having more fat mass, you have more muscle mass, and hence you can get better tone. And I reckon a couple of our members would say that they feel more toned generally.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I would also focus on feeling stronger, because like you say, it's not always, you can't necessarily change the fat that you have there, but you can certainly improve your muscle mass, improve your strength, and that then improves your confidence and how you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So there are a lot of benefits to strength training. So
Indeed.
We hope that was helpful. We hope that you now know how much weight you should be lifting, or better put, now you know how much challenge you should be putting on yourself. Yeah, the level of challenge.
Yeah.
Great. There is a question here from Pam that we will get to. And Pam says, is it better to do more reps with lighter weights or heavier weights and less reps? This is a great question, Pam, and this has been a long debated question for a long time. I would say it completely depends on your goal, right? So one is not necessarily better than the other. Both can help you have things like muscle mass gains. You can gain strength technically from both. However, doing heavier weights allows you to lift heavier things in your daily life. So if you think about the SAID principle, so a specific adaptation to an imposed demand, which basically means whatever you train your body for, it will be able to work to that adaptation. So you train it to lift heavy weights, you'll be able to lift heavy things more easily in your daily life. Whereas if you're doing 100 reps with 1 kilo, it's not necessarily going to help you lift 10 kilos with those arms,
Yeah, that's right. You said, Jack, it comes back to your goal. And, if you had a very specific goal, like there was something in the garden. Oh, yeah, bone. Well, I was actually, that's very true.
Oh, sorry, you were about to.
I was going to say another point, but if you just say, for example, in your everyday life or in the garden, you had something really heavy that you had to lift, something that was 30 or 40 kilos, and you had to lift it and pick it up, doing a heavier weight and less reps would be more beneficial towards training towards that.
Yeah.
Depending on how difficult it is for you to lift that heavier weight. But bone density, certainly the research around that is doing heavier weights for less repetitions improves bone density.
Yeah, and we're probably talking at kind of like 8 and below repetitions. There's various studies quoting various things, but basically thinking getting close to that 5 repetition maximum is what we're talking about.
But we also think it's good to do a variety. It's good 100%. To do different rep ranges, and that's how we write our programs here, because it develops different skills and like
muscle endurance, things like that.
Yeah.
And also it's just fun. Like it's fun.
It gives you variety. That's
if you were to just do 3 sets of 5 repetitions every single time, listen, you might love that. but also your body loves new stimulus as well. Great. And there's a question here from Angie, and she says, you've said muscle mass decreases as we get older. So does exercise bring this back? Yes, to a degree. So muscle mass loss, as with bone density, is a natural part of aging, of the process. So we begin to lose muscle mass, I think, between 3 to 8% per decade after the age of kind of 30 if you're sedentary.
Yes.
That is. You've probably seen pictures of, really muscly kind of people over 55. How did they get there? Often it's because they maintained their gym, 2 or 3 times a week for that whole period for 20, 30 years. But yeah, we do see a natural decline. But of course, you actually can grow more muscle mass.
Yeah, that's right. Strength training can mitigate that process of losing muscle mass as you age.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Angie. And Poppy says, I'm now up to program Robin, week 6, and I can't believe the improvements in my shoulders. Pain I had is gone, and I really have noticed how much stronger my arms are. Go you, Poppy.
That is awesome, Poppy.
Keep killing.
Fantastic work.
And then Val, one of our long-term members, says, I haven't lost weight, but I'm more toned. Flabby arms gone and one less spare tire. Thanks, Val. And that's a really good point. You can gain muscle mass and actually put on weight, but have less fat. So I think when it comes to fat mass as well, one really important measure is your waist circumference, because some people go, we've actually had this quite a lot. They say, oh my God. And this more so happens with women than men, because often men, especially young men, want to put on weight. They go, oh, I've put on 10 kilos. But women will say, oh no, I've put on 1 kilo or 2. And you go, it's fine. It's often because you're actually just building muscle mass, which is awesome.
Yeah. That's what we want. We want to build muscle mass, particularly as we age. Yeah.
Great. Okay. We'll move on to the Q&A, folks. But before we do, if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe or like either our Facebook channel or our public YouTube channel, because we want you to obviously catch all our episodes and all of our other videos that we put out there. And of course, if you do have questions, make sure you bring them along to the live show. And if you get here and ask them live, we will answer them. Doesn't matter if we're here till 6:30 if we keep getting questions. Yeah.
So we did have this question from Rosanna, who's currently doing the 8-week Fit and Strong. And she's asked, what's the best weight to use for a kettlebell when doing the program exercises? So I'm using a 5 kilo weight and it feels far too light.
Yeah, so we hope that this whole episode has answered that question, Rosanna. So when doing your 8-week Fit and Strong program, once again, start low, start at a really easy intensity, and then slowly build up over the weeks. But if it is far too light, I would just hold more weight. So 5 kilos is far too light. You could go to 7 or maybe 10 kilos, depending on what the exercise is.
Yeah.
If it was an upper body exercise, you go up in smaller increments because they're smaller muscles. If it's a big movement like a squat or a deadlift, well, then you could pack on maybe up to 10 kilos, that type of thing. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Definitely. Great advice.
All right. That's it. So, folks, we don't have any more questions in the comments, so we will leave it at that. But you know what, Alicia?
What is that, Jack?
I was, you know, I like getting outdoors. On 2 or 3 times a week, I love to walk through the bush to work. We are very blessed where we live. We have kind of national parks surrounding us, especially up here in kind of Narrabeen. And just recently, the spring wildflowers have started to come out just because of a slight change in that winter weather.
Yeah, a bit of a change in temperature.
Yeah, and so I thought I would just post a beautiful little combination photo from this morning. So I was walking through the bush and I snapped the wattle on the left, that beautiful. I'm a little bit colorblind, but I'm pretty sure that's a nice yellow, is it?
Yes.
Great.
It is indeed.
And then there's a little orchid that was growing out of the ground. Is that a purple or something?
It is a purple. It's a gorgeous purple.
Yeah.
But beautiful orchid. They're really lovely photos.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoy those photos. And you know, we've actually got a brilliant member challenge coming up. So for all of our online members, we have a challenge coming up in September, which we're super pumped about. And this kind of just reminded me of that challenge. And I thought this is a great time of the year, or even if it's autumn in the Northern Hemisphere, all the colors start to change. That's what I love it. And if that's you, this is a great time to either get back into your exercise or really ramp your exercise up. I don't know, you know, it's just time of change.
It is. Spring has sprung, they say. Well, not quite yet, but in a few weeks. So, stay tuned for that member challenge.
Okay, that's great. And Angie says, lovely spring flowers. Thank you, Angie. Appreciate you guys. Once again, as I said, make sure you subscribe and like our YouTube or Facebook channel because we don't want you to miss out on this type of video in the future. But otherwise...
we hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you got something out of it, and we will see you next week.
Okay, see you later.